Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our next lesson. Today we're going to be covering the song Marianne. Now, if you take a second to look at the sheet music that you have, you may be thinking to yourself, this sheet music seems relatively simple. Well, as always, there's a method behind my madness. This song actually is pretty simple, and for good reason. One of the things that I always like to do is, if we're introducing a new way of playing or a new topic, I try not to give you a song which seems overly difficult, because the more difficulty the song just in general has, the less likely it is that you'll be able to work on the topic that we're looking to cover that week. And so that is one of the reasons why this rendition of Marianne was chosen. Looking at it, it seems pretty straightforward. It's 4 lines long. There are only 2 chords in the song, and there are 6 different keys, all of which are right next to each other. So why give you a song like Marianne, or at least in this capacity? Well, what you're going to learn today in our lesson is that there are a multitude, but I'm going to give you 5 different ways that you can go about playing Marianne in essentially degrees of difficulty. We're going to start out talking about the way that I would actually encourage everyone to start playing the song. And there may be some of you that's as far as you get, which is absolutely fine. But as we push through and introduce new topics, the song will increase in its difficulty. And that's the idea. The idea is to be able to take a very simple canvas, but to look at it from different angles. Now, the great thing about this lesson is, once you've gone through it, you can take what you're going to learn today and apply it to other songs that you may have had weeks, months, maybe even years before, depending upon how long you've taken lessons. I can tell you that for our students here at Keys to Fun, I find that they tend to focus their attention, and you might say rightly so, on the songs that we have done most recently. And much of the music that we did when they first began seems to kind of go in the back of the book, never really to be brought out, if not, maybe every once in a while. But the songs appear to them at this point to be so elementary that unless it's a song that they really, really like, they tend not to really play them very much anymore, because there's not that difficulty factor in the song. Well, this week, I'm hoping to change that perspective within you. I've given you a song again, which is by far not one of the hardest songs that I've ever given out in this course, but that is, in my opinion, the secret sauce of this song. It's relatively straightforward, and hopefully it will encourage you to try to do some of the additional aspects of the song, which again, we will go through piece by piece. Now, to start out, let's just talk a little bit about the song Marianne. So the song Marianne, I'm just going to pull up my song history here, was composed by a calypso musician known as Roaring Lion. His name was actually Raphael de Leon. And it was popular with steel bands and revelers during a spontaneous carnival celebration on VJ Day in Trinidad in 1945. At the end of World War II, the song's lyrics alluded to Marianne's occupation. All day, all night, Miss Marianne, down by the seaside, sifting sand. Later, Latin bandleader Xavier Cugat recorded a version of this song. It was done again in the 1950s. Burl Ives did a popular rendition of this song. Harry Belafonte did a popular rendition of this song on at least 3 different albums of his. The most popular version was recorded by Terry Gilkinson and the Easy Riders. It hit number 4 on the Billboard Top 100. Another version was recorded in 1957 by the Hilltoppers. This song was also used in a parody way. If you're familiar with Alan Sherman. He did the Hello Mother, Hello Father of the Dance of the Hours fame. He did a song that parodied this, the same general timing, same notes, but the lyrics were All Day, All Night, Cary Grant. And it was talking about him lamenting over the fact that his wife loved Cary Grant. All she seems to talk about is Cary Grant. So Cary Grant became Marianne, or Marianne rather became Cary Grant. So that's the background of the song. Now let's just talk about the song in general here. And we'll just tackle it, actually starting out talking about some of the things that you may be able to potentially add in. Before I go over the ways that you can change the song, let's just start to talk about the things that you can change about it. So something that you can change, potentially, is the chords and the chord structure of the song. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about adding any more chords in than are already there, but I am talking about the way that the chords are played. Now, whenever we speak about chords, I always seem to want to make the distinction to you as an audience as to what the different types of chords are. We have chords that are called rhythmic chords, and we have chords that are called harmonic chords. Now, those are under the umbrella term of chords. Now, what is a chord? Well, the definition that I've always clung to in regards to chords was a combination of two or more notes played together. We're going to play them, in our case, in the left hand. And their job is either to provide rhythm or harmony, or we'll say and or harmony, for the melody. Again, two or more notes played together in the left hand, whose job is to provide rhythm and or harmony to the melody. Now, what is the melody? The melody is the right hand. Okay. Now, let's start with the beginning of that definition first. Two or more notes. Is that entirely accurate? Well, I guess that really boils down to what you're practicing on at home. Many of you may be saying to yourself, all I see in this song is a C and a G in the left hand, and my instrument gives me the ability to play a C chord using one finger, or a G chord using one finger. And that is well within your opportunity to play here. Put that feature on, whether it's called accompaniment on a lot of the Yamaha products, the Clavinovas, I know it's called ACC, OMP. On the Lowry products, it's called Easy. And what that does, if you turn that feature on, is it plays the other notes of the chord for you, so you don't have to play those notes. Now, if you were to play them yourself, and you were going to play a C chord and a G chord, you would be playing three notes at a time in the left hand. Three notes for the C, three notes for the G. Okay? Now, why some people play one finger, why some people play three? There could be a variety of reasons. It could be ease of play. It could be their point in their progression up until that point only allows them to comfortably play one finger at a time. Maybe they have arthritic issues which do not allow them to play more than one finger at a time. Maybe they're playing multiple fingers because they are on an instrument, practicing on an instrument that doesn't have a feature that gives you the opportunity to play one finger at a time. So there are a variety of reasons why someone may play more than just one key. Okay, again, some instruments allow you to hear more than one note when you play one key, others don't. But again, it could be just the ability of the player. Okay? Either way is harmony. The difference is one you're doing and one the instrument is providing for you on your behalf. Now, a harmonic chord is a chord that just holds. It's heard throughout the measure. And the job of a chord that produces harmony is to tell your ear whether you've played the correct note in the right hand or not, because those notes in the right hand are to I hate to use the word in the definition, but they are to harmonize with the chords. Now, if you have a chord and you have 6 notes that happen to follow it before a new chord is introduced, it means that all 6 of those notes should harmonize with that chord that was played at the beginning. If all of a sudden something sounds wrong, well, you got a 50-50 shot. You made a mistake in one hand or the other. So you say to yourself, well, I haven't had to change my left-hand chord yet, so it must be a mistake in the right. So the harmony is very important in that it lets you know, again, whether you've played the correct note or notes in the right hand or not. Now, what is the other job of a chord? Well, we just said the other job of a chord is that of being able to produce rhythm, a rhythmic chord. What is the difference between a rhythmic chord and a harmonic chord? Well, remember when we said that a harmonic chord just holds? A rhythmic chord doesn't. A rhythmic chord is only heard in part of the measure that it's in. Sometimes you hear it, sometimes you don't. You want to think of the definition of rhythm. Rhythm is essentially doing the same thing in a repeating fashion. After a while, you've heard it so much that you can assume the pattern. You can predict what's going to happen next because it's rhythmic. It's able to be predicted because it's continual. Okay? Now, in terms of music, what does that mean for us when we're talking about chords? Well, it could be someone strumming a guitar chord. It could be someone playing piano chords. Now, what am I doing? I'm moving, because that's what rhythm is all about, whether it's the rhythm of a heartbeat, whether it's the rhythm of an engine in a car, whether it's, there are so many things that you could compare rhythm to. The beat of a drum, rhythm, okay? It's a repeating sound, something that repeats. In music, it's a repeating sound. In general, it's something that is repetitive and therefore relatively predictable. Now, how is that rhythmic chord produced? Well, the rhythmic chord, again, is produced dependent upon who's doing it. Many of you have instruments where you have a section of buttons on the left-hand side. Some say gospel, some say Latin, ballad, waltz, Broadway, country. What are all of those? Those are all rhythm styles. And when you touch one of those and you utilize it during your playing, you might hear a guitar player strumming some chords. You might hear a piano player. There could be a variety of musicians, a horn section. But what they're doing is they're coming in and out. They're doing this, okay? Now, let's say you don't have a feature like that. You're saying, listen, I have an acoustic piano. I don't have any of that stuff. How do I get rhythm? Well, the answer is you produce it. You produce the rhythm by a repetitive motion of your left hand. Your left hand is going to play chords in a repeating fashion. And that motion, that movement is rhythm. Okay? So again, be it rhythm or harmony, some of your instruments provide both for you. Some of you may decide to provide it yourself, in spite of the fact that your instrument produces it. Others may have to produce it because their instrument doesn't. Now, obviously, it's a little bit easier to allow the instrument to produce rhythm, particularly rhythm, also harmony, but particularly rhythm, I found, historically anyhow, because there's less reliance on you. When you're doing it yourself, when you're playing traditionally, there's more up to question because more things are relying on you. It doesn't mean it's the end of the world, it's just fact of the matter. Okay? Now, we said earlier that chords, historically, at least the C chord and the G chord anyhow, are 3-note chords. So why don't we start out with the assumption that either you don't know what the notes are that comprise the C chord and the G chord, or you know and you want to do it. So what would the best way to do it be? Well, let's make a little chart here. I'm going to use the board. And we're going to talk again about a C chord and a G chord. Now again, if you're using a feature which is going to assist you like an easy button or an accompaniment button, all you got to play is the C, all you got to play is the G, and everything else that I write up here on the board is going to be taken care of on your behalf. Okay? The notes in a C chord in its fullest form, there's a C, there's an E, and there's a G. The notes of the G chord are a G, a B, and a D. Now, if there are 3 notes in the chord, it means that I can play that chord 3 different ways. I can put any one of the 3 notes on the left. And by my decision, from that perspective, the notes that follow it are going to be different. Okay? When I put the named chord note at the bottom, we call this root position. Root position means the root, the lowest note, is the name of the chord. Now again, as I said, there are 3 different ways to play this song, the root position being one of the 3. The other 2 ways are called inversions. There's a first and a second inversion, or as a student once tried to explain it to me and I thought it made good sense, there are 2 other versions of the chord aside from the root. In music we call them inversions. Okay? We have a first inversion. We have a second inversion, which mixes up the order. The first inversion leaves the E and the G basically where they are. And it takes the C, which used to be at the root, the key all the way to the left. I should probably mention the fact that when I'm putting these in an order, I'm looking at them from left to right on the keys. Just like this, low to high. Well, if I use the same E and G, but instead of playing the C to the left of the E, I play the C to the right of the G, we call that the first inversion of the C chord. Same would go for the G. I would keep the B and the D, and instead of playing the G to the left of the B, I'm going to play the G to the right of the D. And that is my first inversion there. Okay, I'm going to move this second inversion down a little bit. Now, how about the second inversion? Well, the second inversion is the only other combination that I can have. Because again, I need to play them in order. Well, the only other combination I can have is I can play it this way. I can play the G. I can play this same C. And then I can play the E to the right of that. As this goes, I can play the D. I can play this same G. And instead of the low B, it becomes the B to the right of the G. Those are the 3 different versions of the C chord. Now, how do you remember each one? This can be a little bit tricky. The root, I think, is pretty easy. You just take the name of the chord, whatever the first note is. If it's the same note as the name, that's the root. Remembering which inversion is which takes a little bit more of an effort. But there's a very easy way to do it. What you do is you look at this high note in the root. Each time you move it to the left, it changes from one inversion to the next. So when it goes to the middle, it becomes the first inversion. When it goes to the end, it becomes the second. Same here. The D starts at the top, it goes to the middle, it goes to the end. Now you might be saying to yourself, is there a difference in the sound? Let's say that you have come to terms with the fact that you want to try this. Is there a difference in the sound when I put them in these different orders? The short answer is maybe. The longer answer is it's dependent upon what you're practicing on. Again, if you're using an instrument that's playing all of the other notes for you, it is likely that it doesn't make a difference which order you put them in. But for someone that's playing on a piano, it will. Now, how do you know the order to put them in? This is, again, another question that often comes up. Now you're telling me there's 3 different ways to play these chords. Let's say I am playing on an instrument where I do have a distinction between the two, because it's basically a layering thing. The low note becomes the high note. It's still a C, but it's the higher C instead of the lower C. So it's not going to sound quite as deep, at least the C note, as it did before. It's slight, but it's not a great difference. Here's one. Here's another. Here's another. All a C chord. But as you could hear, played just acoustically, there is a difference. So let's say again, you say to yourself, I hear a difference, and I want to know which one to play. Well, if you look at the sheet music that you're looking at right now, there isn't going to be a difference. There isn't, let me rephrase that. You're not going to be able to tell the order, because the order is dependent upon your decision. Now you might say to yourself, I wish they told me, and I get it. The reason that you cannot tell with the sheet music that you have is that the sheet music you have was not written traditionally. And what I mean when I say it was not written traditionally is that the left hand was written as a letter. If you notice, it doesn't even tell you what the notes are in the chord, it just tells you what the name of the chord is. Now we'll get back to the fact that sometimes it says single note and chord. Just hold those questions for a few moments. I will answer those as we progress through here. But before we do that, all I know is I have to play a C chord. Now I've just gone over with you what the 3 ways you can play a C chord happen to be are, but you wouldn't have known that looking at this music. So not only would you have not have known the notes of the C chord, you wouldn't have known the order in which to put them in, even if you did. That is a benefit, and it is a hindrance. Now, it's a benefit because it makes it a lot easier to read. Okay, the hindrance is there's a lot left up to question. If this was written in a traditional form, the left hand would be written like the right hand is. The right hand has 5 lines and 4 spaces, while the left hand would as well. And the chords would be written as notes. You'd see notes stacked on top of one another if they were meant to be played together. And the order in which they were stacked from low to high would determine which one of these inversions would need to be played. If the E was the lowest note, well, then it would be the first inversion. If the C was the lowest note, well, then it would be the root. Okay? G, lowest note, second inversion for a C chord. It would be stacked on top of one another, almost like a totem pole, and you would know, based upon the stack, which one to play. Now, that's good, in that there's less left up to question. It's tough, and then it's harder to read. Because now you're reading notes in the right hand that are lines and spaces, notes in the left hand that are lines and spaces, and you're also taking into account the order in which they're played in, how long they're held down for, which this affords you the ability not to have to go through it to that extent. So it's a bit of a catch-22 in a way. This music is great because it's very easy to read. It's tough when you have specific questions. Now, then you might say, well, how do I determine which inversion I should play? Well, the short answer is which one sounds good to you. A longer answer might be which one sounds good to you, as well as which order can I put these in where my hands don't run into one another. Now, those of you with organs playing on 2 levels, not an issue. Your left hand plays on one, your right hand plays on the other level. They could even cross. It's one of the benefits of a 2-level instrument is you have that opportunity, which is great, okay? But for those of you playing on 1 level, you got to take into account there's a spot where my left hand is going to start to encroach on my right hand and vice versa. So do I stack these in a different order in order to avoid that happening? Okay? You also may want to say, I guess this goes back to, does it sound good or not, but are my notes stacked in a way which make them sound too deep? Because to put the notes in a different order, I need to go right or left. Well, I can only go so far left, I guess, and I guess I really can only go so far right. But if I'm playing notes stacked on top of one another, way down to the left-hand side of the key bed there, it's going to sound pretty muddy. So by moving up to another inversion, I'm continually moving to the right, and the higher I go, the less muddy it will sound. Now, eventually I'm going to get into encroaching on the right hand, so I don't want to go that far. But again, it's a sound quality decision at the end of the day. Okay? Now, looking at Marianne, something you'll notice is that there are no letters inside of the notes. Okay? That may be good news, that may be bad news. I don't know. You're going to have to answer that yourself. Now, that doesn't mean they can't be written in here. Let me at least start there. Okay? This song is comprised of 6 notes. Now, if you've been through any of the beginner lessons in our program, we've gone through songs like that before, where we had 6 notes. Luckily, they were all successive, 6 in a row. And you had to make a decision because you got 5 fingers, you got 6 keys. One of your fingers is going to play 2 keys. And it's my suggestion that it's one on the end, either the thumb or the pinky. Well, if you look at this rendition of Marianne that you have here, they have suggested the thumb. And I think rightfully so, because your thumb only needs to move off of the key it starts on 2 times. Once on the second line and once on the 4th. Other than that, we have middle C with the thumb, D, E, F, G. The only time we need to move is in the middle of line 2. We have to go to the low B, so our thumb goes down 1 key, and that happens again on line 4. Other than that, it's a 5-note song, aside from those 2 notes, and you can put your hand in one spot and cover all of the notes. Now, I do need to at least mention the fact that this could be done a second way. You could put your thumb on the B and leave it there. That means your index finger is now responsible to play the middle C, your middle finger's on the D, your ring finger's on the E, and your pinky's on the F. And that would mean that your pinky goes up 1 key to get to the G. Now, that's not wrong. I don't think it's preferable for one, because you're going to have to do that a lot more than just moving your thumb down. And 2, I found historically that my students find that their thumb has a little bit more dexterity than their pinky. So if you want to go ahead and use the thumb instead, I would prefer that, but that's what I do. But if you want to use the pinky, go ahead. Okay, the idea is that 4 of your 5 fingers stay where they started. Now, the left hand, you'll notice that some of these left hand movements say single note above them, in which case you don't see a box. And then some of them say chord above them, in which case you do see it is enclosed by a box. Now, if you are playing, particularly using a 1-finger chord, you're not going to make a distinction here. And even if you are playing just chords in your left hand, one of these 3 combinations, you're still not going to make a difference. If it's a C, whether there's a box around it or not, you play it the same way. Okay, now I will go over why you might play it a little bit of a different way in a few moments, but for our sake right now, if you're playing it that way, just play it the same way, whether there's a letter inside, or rather whether there's a box around the letter or not. Okay? They've given us suggestions. One thing that you can see at the beginning of the song, it says to play in what we call 8VA. 8VA calls for us to play the notes 1 octave above or 1 octave to the right. So instead of playing here, we would play here. Now, a question often comes up in terms of, well, if they wanted me to play it there, why wouldn't they write the notes there? And the short answer is that there are notes, once you start to get really high up here, which creep above the lines and spaces that we're familiar with, and then you have to deal with all of these ledger lines. So in a way, this is a way to make it easier to read the music. They put the notes where they normally would go, and they say to you, just play them as if they were higher. Now, my reason that I find this is helpful is if you all are adding extra fingers into your left hand, which you may very well be doing, the more fingers you add in, the more likely the possibility is that your hands run into each other. Well, by moving your right hand an octave away, you just gain yourself some more space, particularly for the left hand, so that they're less likely to hit one another. The instructions suggest using a Latin style if you're going to use one. I will reposition myself in just a few minutes and show you how I would go about doing that. The vibes are the piano. Now this is a one-page song. It's only 4 lines long, so you may want to go through it more than once. And if you do, maybe you use those 2 suggested sounds. Maybe use the vibes first and the piano second, or vice versa. Maybe use your own 2 sounds. It really doesn't much matter to me. I would suggest using something that is appropriate for Latin. So I might leave the bagpipes for another day. But something like the guitar or the xylophone or the marimba, some brass instruments, trumpets, things like that would work absolutely fine. Vibes and piano as well would work fine. They've given us some numbers timing-wise, just to remind us that there's 4 beats in each one of these individual measures. And that's important because the copy of the music that you have gotten, there is a possibility. I always try to make sure that you're able to receive the best copy possible, but there's always the possibility that the copy that you get, or maybe your copy machine itself, doesn't print it out as clear as you'd like it to be printed. Well, we have mostly half notes in this song and some whole notes tied together. But there are some quarters, some 1-beat notes. And there's a possibility that your 1-beat notes, which should be all filled in the middle, may not be. So let me just quickly go over the 1-beat notes in case that did not print out clearly. There are 2 1-beat notes on the first line. In the 3rd measure over, the first 2 notes are 1-beat notes. So you need to make sure they're all filled in. Okay. On the second line, the second 2 notes on line 2 and the first 2 notes in the 3rd measure are 1-beat notes. On the 3rd line, the first 4 notes are 1-beat notes. Then we have a 2-beat note. It's a middle C. And then there are another 4 1-beat notes after that. Finally, the 4th line, timing-wise, should look just like line 2. Second 2 notes in the 1st measure, the first 2 notes in the 3rd. Now, I want to play this song. How do I go about playing the song itself? Well, you decide, really, the degree of difficulty that you want. Now, that may sound kind of funny to hear, but this really is an interesting topic. It's something that we will expound upon, and certainly can expound upon later, where when you buy a book, piece of literature, there could be other translations in other languages, but for the most part, that book's going to be printed the same way no matter where you buy it. I mean, the cover might look a little bit differently, but go buy A Tale of Two Cities is the example I usually give. The Catcher in the Rye, just thinking of classics. It doesn't matter what bookstore you go to. For the most part, that's going to be printed the same way. There's going to be the same amount of pages. The chapters are going to be the same. There's going to be the same breaks. That's not true in music. Okay? And, you know, I can really only think of the Bible as being another book, off the top of my head anyways, that is printed different ways because there are different translations, different versions of it. You know, you have your King James, you have a variety of different versions of the Bible. But for the most part, most of printed material is printed one way. Well, it cannot be any different with music. Music, you can have multiple variations of the same sheet music in varying degrees of difficulty. So I don't want you ever to think if you receive a song from me or you find a song on your own that you want to play that is the only rendition of that song. Songs can be written using more keys in some versions than others. They can be written in different keys. They can be written differently depending upon the instrument that is intended to play that music. And so as you look at this music, you have one page. But I'm about to show you that you can play it 5 different ways. I'm going to go ahead and reposition the camera and walk you through each one of the 5 ways in degrees of difficulty, and it's going to allow you to decide how much essentially you want to bite off and chew with this song. You could take it very simply, at face value. And if you do that, I trust that you probably won't have that much trouble with it. By the end, you're going to see a very different arrangement of this song. I'm going to be playing exactly what I see here, but I'm going to interpret it a little bit differently. And the more interpretation that I make, the more difficult it's going to be. You may say the more impressive it sounds, which may be. Okay, I think it sounds pretty impressive when you're using the technology, but still, some people have this inclination to do more because either they want to or they don't have that technology. So let's go ahead and reposition ourselves. When I come back, we're going to have a bird's eye view of my playing, and I'll show you a few different ways that you can play this one-page version of Marianne. Okay, so here we are on the Lowry Easy 3 Cadet. We're going to play Marianne in the most straightforward way possible. I'm going to look on the left-hand top corner of my page. It says, if using a style, use Latin. So I'm going to go up and hit the button that says Latin. Vibes or piano? Well, I'm going to clear out my screen here for a second, and I'm going to see that the more button is on here. I guess I don't need my screen to see that. And that sounds like vibes to me. Just to confirm it, I'm going to turn off my more button, turn it back on, and what do I see but vibes? Okay. Strings in the left hand. Now, that's going to be on this instrument. Again, I'm speaking very instrument specific, but I know some of you have instruments like this at home. I have a button over here that on the left-hand side says more. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off and turn it back on, and I can see on the screen it says string, so that's been taken care of for me. The easy button or accompaniment button, I'm on a Lowry, so I have the easy button. Tempo, somewhere between 100 and 115 beats per minute. I can see here I'm right smack dab in the middle at 108. And it says play 8 VA, which means I'm not going to start here. I'm going to start an octave up. But I'm going to use one finger in each hand. My left hand, I'm very comfortable when I'm playing one finger to use the thumb and the ring finger, thumb on the C, ring finger on the G. My right hand is going to stay here, C, D, E, F, G. And when I need that B, my thumb is going to shift down in order to play it. Now I'm going to go through it 2 times, the second time with the piano, and I'm just going to reach up and hit the button that says piano. It's going to reset my vibes to the piano, and I can play it through again. If I want to use an introduction, it's not calling for one, but if I do, I want to do that. I'm going to play a C to start. Left hand, one finger. Now here I am on a 2-level instrument. I'm going to play it again twice, but the advantage here is I don't have to hit any buttons to get from one sound to the next. I'm going to go up to my Latin style, comes up at 107 beats per minute, and I'm going to change to make sure that my vibes are on one level and my piano is on another. That way I can just move down when I need to restart. Now this time through, in adding a little bit of difficulty, this is the next step in the process. Think about those 3-note chords. Think about the order in which you can play them. Now, I want to forewarn you that playing on here, you're not going to hear a difference when I play a 3-note chord as compared to a 1-note chord like you just heard. Now, when I finish up on the piano, you will hear a difference, okay? But I am going to play 3 notes just so you can see what I'm doing. You can see the inversions that I'm using. And I've always been a big fan of using inversions if I have the decision and it doesn't make a difference in the sound, which is the case here, that I can use inversions which allow me to keep my hand in one spot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this with the inversion where my pinky is on the C, my index finger is on the, my pinky is on the G, I apologize. My index finger is on the C and my thumb is on the E, which if you go back to our lesson was the second inversion of C. Now from there, I'm going to go to my first my root position of G by just bringing these top 2 fingers down. Now I have G, B, D. Look at how easily I can make that transition. And again, it doesn't make a difference in the sound. So I have the liberty to do that. The music doesn't tell me. I'm not going to hear a difference in the sound. I'm going to do it my way. Okay? Here is Marianne now, played top level, bottom level with more than 1 finger in the left hand. Now, has it been too easy? I don't know. But in the event that it has, let's add another element into the song. Well, another element that you can add in is you can make the decision to create the rhythm yourself. Now, I am on a particular digital piano which plays styles for me, rhythmic backgrounds. I have country rhythms and Latin rhythms and jazz rhythms and waltzes and about any rhythm that you can imagine, this instrument will play. But I also have the ability to create the rhythm myself. And this is where the distinction in how the left hand is printed is made. Because you can see some instances where it says single note, and you can see other instances where it says chord. Now, if you're playing and you're looking to play a single note in the left hand, essentially what they're calling for you to do is to play a single note in the bass. And on a piano, the bass is generally about the last 2 octaves is usually where most piano players would play bass. On an organ, this would actually be on the feet, the foot pedals. But for our purposes, we're going to play here. Now, I want to make a distinction between the bass and the chord, even though it's going to be different in that the bass is only going to be 1 note. This is not going to sound good with a chord. Not quite as good as it would sound up here. Okay? Chords generally don't sound good when you get really, really low. Okay? They sound a little bit better up in this range here. So every time that I see single note, you're going to see me reach down here. Every time I see chord, I'm going to be in this general vicinity up here. Now this is going to create a rhythmic movement of my left hand because I am creating the rhythm. Now again, my right hand is an octave up. So if you watch here, my right hand is going to be here. Watch to see what my left hand does. My left hand creates a rhythm for my right. And you can change to different sounds. I use the piano, but you could use the vibes. It's entirely up to you how you want the instrument to sound, particularly if you're playing on something where you have the ability to make changes like that. Okay? Now, let's go over something. So that was the third way. How about another way that I could add some difficulty into this? Well, we just added some potential difficulty in the left hand with two different renditions. One added the notes of the chord. The other had some movement involved with the notes of the chord. We had a bass tone and then we came back up for the chord itself. How about some addition to the right hand? Now, this is really cool. So my notes are here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a note that harmonizes with these notes. Each one of the notes is going to get its own buddy. And its buddy is always going to be the same distance away, no matter what note you're on. What we're going to do is we're going to count down 6 keys from the key that you have to play. We're going to use all the white keys here. And I'm counting using my first key as number 1. So I'm going to go 1, this is the E, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it starts out E and G. Now I can't really reach those in a very easy way unless I use my pinky and my thumb. Now those two notes harmonize with one another. The low G and the high E. Now, how about my next note? Well, the next note, played note that I can see here is the high G. What's 6 notes down from the high G if I count the G with it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the B. So it starts out here. Then I have the C. 6 keys down from the C. Now this is not an easy thing to do. You really have to pay attention to this. Or you can very easily hit the wrong key. But what a nice addition that is. Now one thing that I've been telling students that have struggled with this is make sure there's 4 keys in the middle. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a pretty easy way, easier way, probably a better way to put it, to make sure that you're doing it the right way. Okay? So you can add that in. Now you might say, oh my goodness, adding that in is going to make that right hand challenging. So I'm going to go back to just doing with the Latin beat. I'm going to use that, and I am going to play just with the 1-finger chord. So I want to make sure that that's on, because my goodness, I don't want to have to worry about any of that nonsense if I'm going to try to do this. So you can kind of take a step back with the left hand a little bit and add the addition into the right. So here's your background. We'll put a little beat on here. Now again, you can start doing combinations. You can say, well, I think I might be able to do the 3 fingers and try to play that as well. That would be another step in the scenario here. Well, what if I wanted to combine the last 2 things that I went over? This, in my opinion, would be the hardest way to play this song. So if you've made it this far, maybe you can take this final step. And this final step would be adding this element with this element, which makes it very, very tricky. Now I'm going to play this very slowly, so for those of you that want to try to mimic this method, it's not easy, okay? But you would be getting a really full sound from a song that, looking at it, seems fairly straightforward. Some might even say fairly easy. But if you watch to see what I'm doing, I think that it's anything but if you're trying to interpret it this way, okay? So we're going to start out here, single note, and the double over here. So that is our song this week, Marianne, played 5 times or more, depending upon the different combinations that you'd like to make. Again, the idea behind this was to take what appeared to be a very simple canvas and allow you to interpret it the way that you'd like based upon either your preference or your ability. The nice thing about using a simple song, again, is that you can use this logic that we've gone over here and the different methods to apply to other songs. Songs that you may also have that may be 1-page songs, which you may not even go through anymore. You might say, those songs are easy. Well, this is a way to breathe some fresh air into some of those pieces by making them a little bit more challenging, and it makes it seem like a brand new song. I hope you enjoyed the lesson this week. We'll see you very soon.